Ferrer, and I'm with Homegrown, Missouri, and I'm going to show you how to make sauerkraut. Okay, so sauerkraut, you start with your cabbage, medium cabbage head, and you rip off your cabbage leaves. Usually I like ripping off the outside parts because they're kind of bitter and I don't use them. So you get your cabbage leaves, about 4 of them, 4 or 3. And you get your pounder and you start pounding them. This helps with the fermentation. It releases the juices in the leaves. Just pound them. You can see they're kind of wet, and you get your knife, and I usually dice them, but you can cut them to your own preference, and you just cut them. Got them cut, you throw them into your mixing bowl. And then, after that in the mixing bowl, I kind of press it a little bit, even more, to release even more juices. You could also use a pestle if you have one to mash it. I just use my fists. And you just repeat this process until you have the whole cabbage done. And once you have that done, you add your salt. Usually for 1 cabbage, I use 2 tablespoons of salt. And then you add your whey. And whey is derived from milk. Usually when you get milk from the store, not pasteurized like raw milk, or I guess pasteurized would work too. It separates when you leave it out for a day, and the bottom part, which is more clear, is the whey, and the curds float to the top. So you separate and use the whey. It helps with the fermentation. And usually I would use 2 tablespoons of whey for a whole cabbage. This is optional. I usually like using caraway seeds to spice it, and that's traditionally what they use in German recipes. And again, it's all to your own preference. You can put whatever spices you want, and usually, I just throw in a lot of caraway seeds in there. And mix that up really well. And once you have this mixture, nice, you put it into your quart jar or mason jar. And you smash it into there. You can use a pestle too for this, or sometimes I like using a wooden spoon. Just smash that in there. And then once you have the jar filled to the top with all the cabbage, you just let this sit for 3 days to a week. Some people let it sit even longer, and it can last like very long because the fermentation just keeps it lasting long without mold or any bacteria. I mean, bacteria that'll make you sick. It's good bacteria that it's beneficial. So you just let this sit for 3 days to a week. That's how long I usually let it sit. And it'll start tasting fermented, and then you have your sauerkraut. Yeah. So some of the benefits of sauerkraut is that it's very high in vitamins, especially vitamin C. It's easily digestible because it's fermented. Lots of good bacteria. The fermentation process produces a lot of helpful enzymes, and it promotes growth of intestinal flora vital to digestive health. It contains glucosinolates, which may help reduce the risk of cancer, and it's rich in source of fiber, approximately 8 grams in every cup.
Does anyone have any questions?
Are there any benefits of sauerkraut that you can't get from other sources?
Any benefits of sauerkraut?
Yeah, like colon benefits or digestion or something that you wouldn't get in other foods. Or
Well, one thing is that it has a lot of enzymes, and those enzymes increase as you let it ferment over time, and that really helps with digestion. And if you have like any indigestion problems or like problems with digestion, gastrointestinal, it really helps. And
do you have to put anything on, like a stone or anything on top of that to keep it below the, as it makes fluid? Do you have to keep it below there? Do you mix it or what?
Well, some people put it in a big crock so they can like have a plate on top of it and like sand or something, like a bag of sand to keep it pressed down. Usually, I like opening it like after a couple of days and pressing it down a little more so the more juices come out. You can do that, or you can have something on top of it if you have a big crock.
I do have a big crock, and I've never used it. I got very interested in this fermentation 2 or 3 years ago, and so I purchased books and I read up on things, and I bought some very expensive crocks, and I've not ever used them, but that's why I'm here today.
Yeah, with the crock, a friend of mine used a plate that would fit in the crock, but just like perfectly, and not much like airspace in between, and then you put something on top of the
My
plate.
crocks have stones that are 2 halves that you put that in there, and it's got like a moat around the top. And so I wanted to come and actually see it done because I learned better watching it.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, this is what I use for my sauerkraut.
I have some of those that I got for kombucha tea.
Yeah, and it's what I use for mine. And I, instead of mashing it down like he did, I cut it up and then mashed it down in here. So that's another way that you can do it. And then you can actually take, if you use those outer leaves, if you wash those off, you can put the leaves on top of it. And then I took a bag, just a plastic bag, kitchen bag that you would use, filled it with the brine solution, which is a certain amount of salt and water, and make sure that bag totally covered that area, and I had no stone to take off or anything like that.
You didn't have to open it and take stuff off.
At all.
And I've got a similar setup, and what I did is I had a saucer that I could just barely get in there, and I put it down on there, and I put some, just some other little bowls that I had just for weight on top of it so that I kept it down, and I didn't have much of a problem with
In a container that size, how many heads of cabbage did you put in?
my heads of cabbage were a little bit bigger than that, and I used 3 heads. And from smashing it down, I really only had about that much cabbage in there. I had enough when I finished it, I had 2.5 quarts of cabbage. So because the volume really shrinks, because, you know, as
So was it mostly full when you first put the chocolate cabbage in?
No, actually it was up a little bit higher, but I just kept smashing it down. And, you know, because you want the liquid to come up above the level of the cabbage when you're doing it in a crock like this. And I bought this at Walmart several years ago, so it wasn't very expensive. I don't remember how much, but
I
it
just
wasn't very much.
bought one recently. I don't remember, a couple of
I bought
dollars.
one day before yesterday and it was $10.
$10.
Yes.
So if you don't have the quart jars, it's another option for you. It's a very inexpensive option. Now, when I did mine, I had a little tea towel like this. I did not put the lid on it. I had a tea towel like this, laid that over it, and put a rubber band around it. and that's how I have mine. And then I put a towel around it.
I think it says somewhere in here that it helps if it's in dark.
Well, does anybody here have the kind of crocks I was describing?
No, but they're in this book.
I did
They're
see
very
them in
expensive, nice.
I know.
crops.
I really had to think on
This is a book that I got through a food co-op. It tells all about sauerkraut, and it tells about a lot of the different spices that you can use with sauerkraut, which caraway seeds is what he used, and that's what I use because I really like the flavor of those. But I also recently bought some juniper berries because they're high in lactic acid, and really this whole process, it's the lactic acid that kind of does the fermentation. And the reason you put the whey and the salt is so that it retards spoilage until that lactic acid can start working. So that's the purpose of the different ingredients. And
That's what I was wondering, why the whey? I've never heard of using whey.
well, whey helps get the fermentation going.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it actually helps it last longer too. Like it lasts a lot longer with the whey, the lacto fermentation. And traditionally, they would use whey to put in sauerkraut. It aids the fermentation because it has lactic acid in it too.
Do you have finished goods?
Huh?
I'm sorry, say again?
Finish.
Yeah.
Finish them.
Yeah, I have samples for everybody. This is a finished product. I only fermented this for like a day and a half though, so it's not very fermented, but
Yeah, we just ran out of that one.
And
yeah.
that's red cabbage colors. Is that red cabbage?
Yeah, well actually this is red cabbage and green
Yeah, I
cabbage.
was like,
Yeah, I just mixed them together.
And if anybody would like to look, this book also has different spices that you can use. Juniper berries happens to be high in lactic acid, so that's a good mix for sauerkraut, but anybody can look at this later and it tells you more than just sauerkraut too. It's got other vegetables in it.
And I'd like to add just that this is one of the cheapest and most healthful foods that you can eat. Cabbage is so cheap. And I literally made mine. I didn't even know about the whey at the time. I made mine with cabbage and sea salt. That's it.
And what?
Cabbage and sea salt.
That's all I ever.
That's it. I mean, it is the cheapest food that you can make, and it is really helpful. So, you know, a lot of times people say, well, there's so much time, it's so much expense. Not with this, there isn't. I mean, it is very, very simple and very cheap.
And one of the things it says in this book too is it is especially beneficial for your colon health.
Yes.
If you know anybody that's getting colon cancer or, you know, has polyps or anything like that, sauerkraut is one of the best things that they can do for their colon.
How long can you keep it?
Oh gosh,
She said, how long can you keep it?
Long time.
I have mine in the fridge when I did mine, and it's in the fridge right now in jars, because it's actually the most healthful way to eat it is raw. A lot of people want to heat it, and a lot of times that will kill the enzymes that are actually very good for you. So eating it raw is the best way, and it's very crunchy. And
Makes delicious sandwiches.
yeah, I bet it does.
And it's one of those things that you should be eating, you know, a little bit throughout the day instead of just eating a great big old bunch of sauerkraut, so that you're constantly getting that beneficial.
Makes good Reuben sandwiches.
Yeah, David, yeah.
Oh, just
I knew somebody who had it in a crock, and she had it like Carlos was saying, with a plate, and she had a bag of sand on top of that to keep it weighted down. And she had it for a year out of the refrigerator, just in her closet for a year, and it was still totally good.
Yeah.
It was just that she had no air coming in because she had that bag of sand that was on top of
Well,
it.
this is how they used to preserve their food.
Yeah.
Before we had refrigerators and all this other stuff, so.
It's all about the fermentation.
Yes.
Gotta get it started fast.
Yeah.
Because once the lactic acid takes over, then you don't have the spoilage. So that's one of the reasons why the whey helps, because it helps that process along. And there's spices that you can use, particularly juniper berries, and there's a few others mentioned, that are high in lactic acid that will help that process along faster also.
Okay, and some samples.
I have a question for you. Where do you get juniper berries?
I got them at the Shore Standard, which is a food co-op for some of us.
Oh, okay.
Where do you get them?
Well, we order, the company's out of Morgan.
You order it.
We order it online. There may be a drop in your area though. I know there's a lot.
So is that the end of our presentation, Carlos?
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks for your thing, and we'll try your sauerkraut here.
Thank you, Carlos.